Hello, Jeffrey Baffo here, HumbleBumble Chess Services, with part 3 of the process-driven, or also known as the decision tree method of selecting a good move. It is what is it? It's Thursday, the 25th of June, 2020. And we talked a little bit about the macro processes or the foundational processes, the big processes that have to be broken down into little processes. And I have not cataloged every single process because chess is so multifarious, it's so layered, it's so deep that I don't know if it's even really possible for a human being to know every process that would be needed. But if you knew a lot of different processes and you did them consistently and accurately, you're almost always going to produce a good move. That's how computers play so good, is they have a set of digital cyber processes programmed into them, and they execute those processes flawlessly. Now, it took a while. It took how long have computers been playing chess? 30 years, 40 years? It took a while before those processes were refined. So in other words, they were found to be inadequate, and plus processing speed increased as the years went on. So, but you're a human being. You don't have that kind of bulk processing power. You've got to understand things within the limitations of a human mind. So here's some ways to do that. Just a quick review. The major foundational process is how to checkmate. Then the next one is how to win material. The third foundational process is how to build up a good position. And again, this is not a comprehensive examination. I don't think that's really possible, at least not possible unless you want like a month-long video to do that. I don't think even the great writers and thinkers of the game have put together a comprehensive body of work that includes every relevant process in chess. But here are some of the things that other thinkers have done. And again, there's so many different thinkers on chess that have their own system and their own set of terms to describe that system. This is just a sampling of the ones that I thought were interesting. And let me put the visual aid up here. Zoom in on that there. Okay, so the first one is the imbalances factor. So the way you get a strong position is by influencing those imbalances in your favor. So there were 7, and then the chess thinker involved here is Jeremy Silman. There were 7, and then he expanded them to 10. I don't know if that really was necessary. You know, I guess he's the teacher and I'm not, so I guess we go with what he wants to do. But superior minor piece, that basically just talks about the pieces are symmetrical. So in other words, the queens kind of cancel each other out, the rooks kind of cancel each other out. But the bishops and knights sometimes can be cross-matched. In other words, it might not be bishops against bishops, it might be bishops against knights. And bishops and knights have unique characteristics, even though on the material scale, they're both rated at about 3 points. The way I explain it to my students is if you were offered a bulldozer or a Ferrari for a race, which would you pick? Well, most of the times you'd say, I'd pick the Ferrari. But what if you knew that the race was at the bottom of the Grand Canyon? Well, then maybe the bulldozer is the right choice. The bottom line is both of these pieces have good and bad points, strengths and weaknesses, and that in light of the other characteristics in the position, one person that has the correct minor piece to exploit those peculiarities is going to be the person with the advantage. So that one of the imbalances you should try to tilt in your favor is to have the right minor piece. Now again, as I said, almost every single process can be broken down into smaller processes. So then how would you go about getting the right minor piece. So that's again, that like I said, this is not a comprehensive list. It's just the major ones, and then each one of these ones could be broken down further. Okay, pawn structure, and again, that depends on the situation. But there's pawn structures that work in some situations and not in others. There's not a unique best pawn structure. Sometimes double pawns are seen as a weakness, and sometimes that double pawn will give you extra control, extra pawn control exactly where you need it, and you get a half open or open file because of the double pawn. So the imbalance, again, that you're wanting to tilt in your favor is that the pawn structure favors you, okay? Space. Now, the space sometimes is wrongly thought to be putting your piece into the other guy's territory. That's not space. Space is the amount of room that you have to maneuver behind the wall of your pawns. Just as the space in your house is defined by the walls of your house, your pawn structure is like a wall, and it can be pushed out and expanded. When you do that, you have more space behind it to maneuver. Now, can your opponent get into that space? Yeah, they can, and sometimes they can exploit that space. So space, again, it's not a one-way street, and space can be good, or you can expand too rapidly and have too much space in your position, which can be exploited by enemy pieces. So, but in general, more space is better, and that's an imbalance you want to tilt to your favor by gaining more space. Material is pretty simple. You have a bigger and or stronger army. So you have 5 pawns, the other guy only has 3. You have a rook and a knight, they only have a knight and a bishop. You've got a queen and they've only got a rook and 2 pawns. So the material scale that's prevalent is with the pawn somewhere around 1 point, knights and bishops approximately 3, rooks approximately 5-ish, and the queens 9-ish. So based on that, if you have more points or numerical superior army, that's a balance that can tilt in your favor by having the bigger or stronger army. Development, that just means you're bringing your pieces out into the game. Now at the start, development means you want to develop a new piece with every move, unless there's a very good reason not to. So in other words, if you were a football or a soccer team, you wouldn't walk out on the field with only 8 guys or eight people. You would have the full 11 or 5 or whatever the complement of your sports team was. You'd take that full team out there, right? So it's the same in chess. I mean, you've got the king and queen and 6 additional pieces, and you've got 8 pawns. Now the pawns, it's kind of, you have to be careful with, but the pieces you want to get out there, you want to bring them to the fight and not try to fight the other person's whole army with just 1 or 2 of your pieces. Now, there are exceptions. There are always exceptions with chess. Sometimes if you have a piece, even 1 or 2 pieces, you can get into the other person's position and do a lot of damage. So, yeah, it's not an absolute. So, but in general, bring a new piece out with every move. Get your full team involved. And then development later in the game is localized. So in other words, if you have a situation, a sphere of action, and you've got more pieces in that area, then you've got a local development advantage or a localized development advantage. So that's the imbalance you want to tilt in your favor there. He has files in squares listed separately. In his old thing, I just would have put that as lines and squares. Lines and squares in chess are like points on a map or roads. If you had control of your driveway to your house, that's great. But if another person had control of an interstate, that's probably more important, more influential. So you can look at lines and squares as transportation points. So in other words, a rank might be really important. A particular file might be really important. A single square might be really important. You want to seize control of those important lines and squares, an imbalance that you can tilt in your favor. Initiative. Initiative basically is how compelling are your threats. So if you have a threat to win a pawn, but the other person has a threat to win a knight, he has the initiative. He or she has the initiative because their threat is more compelling and more important and more dangerous. Okay. King safety. Now, king safety, I would put under the category of initiative. If you have, again, an attack against the king, that's the trump card that beats anything else. I don't care how much of my material you win. If I'm checkmating your king, I win the game. So, then statics versus dynamics, which is just someone's way of saying that some advantages are durable and long-lasting, and some are fleeting and will go away quickly. So in other words, the static ones will carry throughout the whole game into the end game. The dynamic ones tend to be there for a brief time, and if you allow your opponent time, they'll catch up in whatever that advantage is, and they'll equalize. So dynamic advantage is something you need to use quickly and forcefully, and a static dynamic is something you can kind of patiently nurture and grow. Okay, elements. These are elements from Aron Nimzovitch, and who did his major writing about 100 years ago. And his were the center, open files, 7th and 8th ranks, passed pawns, pins, discovered checks, pawn chains, and exchanging. A lot of similar things just stated differently. So the center, open files, and 7th and 8th rank, that's just a way of saying lines and squares. Passed pawns are very important for the end game. Discovered check is a tactical device. Pawn chains are when pawns are protecting each other in a line. That's a chain of pawns, and to know how to play against a pawn chain, and usually the method is you attack it at its base, but how to play against those pawn chains is very important in Nimzovich's elements. So, and then the last one is exchanging. Okay, now you've already know mine is basically a decision tree method. So I'm either attacking, defending, or building up. If you're building up, you're going to want to improve your pieces and get an advantage. And I have no problem. I don't have unique things that replace these things. So basically, any factor that can be said in chess is something you want to look at and see if you can build up your position when you do not have a direct threat or an attack or something you have to a direct threat you have to defend against. So I call that normal conduct. So in other words, my normal conduct is you really only have two goals: is checkmate or gain of material. To do that, you need to have an advantage of some sort, but you also need to do routine things like develop your pieces, keep your king safe, etc. The normal conduct for the opening of a game, and again, always there are exceptions, so this is not an ironclad rule, but you want to use minimum pawn moves to control or influence the center. You want to develop, and your development should go knights before bishops, king side before queen side, and then castle early. You want to connect your rooks by the sensible deployment of your queen, and then reposition pieces as needed. You follow that path, with consistency, unless you see one of two things. And let me put this up on the screen real quick so you can I did this previously, but it's worth seeing again. So you do the routine or normal conduct unless you see one of two things: an opportunity, a danger, or an opportunity. So the example of the metaphor I use is if you were, brushing your teeth. That's a routine thing. But if while you're brushing your teeth, you notice smoke coming out of your kitchen, you're probably going to stop that normal conduct and go find out what the smoke is. And then same thing if you were brushing your teeth, and then somebody told you there was a knock at the door, and there was Publishers Clearinghouse wanted to give you $1 million, you're probably going to stop brushing your teeth and go get that opportunity or squelch that danger. So that's normal conduct here. Here's another one that this comes from a teacher who's actually here in Colorado. That's my native state is Colorado, and it's called Force Function Trapped. I don't know that this person's ever put it out in a book or copyrighted or anything like that, but it's very, very interesting. Basically, force is the calculations of exchanges and trying to win material when you can. So in other words, you've got a piece, I attacked it once, it's not defended, now you've defended it once, I'll attack it twice, or it's pinned or whatever. It's basically how is material getting won. That's a force indicator. So in other words, if you got something defended once, but I've got it attacked twice. That's a flashing red light for the force indicator in my favor. Then function is basically kind of a defensive thing where a piece or a pawn has a function of some sort, blocking a file, guarding another piece, guarding a square or something. And then if you can interfere or make that piece or pawn drop its function, then that's going to be very valuable to you. And then the last factor is trapped, which basically means a piece or pawn can be short of flight squares and cannot escape, and that you simply just have to threaten it because of it being trapped, it's going to be lost. So, and now there are probably dozens of other of these systems. Call them what you like. The key thing for you as a player is to get out there and play chess. Play games, record them, look at, and with engines, when you record a game, you can put it into an engine, and the engine can literally give you a graph of where you messed up. And you can pinpoint that, look at that error, and understand, how did I make the error? What was I thinking? What did I miss? And then you can get stronger from that. But as I was saying, there's probably dozens of other systems. Hans Berliner, the former correspondence champion of the world, has a system. The one book that I reviewed a couple times, White to Play and Win, he had a system. There's all sorts of different systems. The best system is the one that you understand and that you have found by playing chess. So if you want to read about these other systems, that's probably going to help you. That's probably going to increase your knowledge and sensitivity to spotting these things in your own games. So that's basically the end of the process-driven or decision tree method of playing chess. And as I said, I've given you the big processes, the macro processes, and then breaking them down into little processes. That's the tricky and hard part. And that's something that basically only your own experience, you cannot learn from a book. You've got to get out there and play chess, take your licks, and find out where you went wrong and what did you do right, what did you do wrong, and how do you get better. Thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.